Hello, 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 and welcome to Important Nonsense Free Agency Week 2. That's numero duo in the books. And of course, I am joined by my number 2 co-host, my second favorite person at importantnonsense.com, me, of course, being my first favorite. It's Mike Manning. Mike, how's it going here?
Pretty good. I mean, you're just gushing all over me with that. I didn't expect to be complimented and be so high on your list.
I was very tempted. I was about this close to saying my second favorite, and I'm not going to tell you who my first is, but then I pivoted.
That's okay. I like to know.
It's numero duno from now on the podcast. And speaking of number twos, Matt Ryan, number 2 of the Atlanta Falcons, same number, new team. What do you think about this move for the Colts, Mike?
I mean, overall, it's a good move. They've had success with more veteran free agents or veteran quarterbacks like Phillip Rivers, a couple years ago. And this team is built to win. There's no doubt about that. This team is a very good defense. The scheme in general has been proven for years. There's playmakers on the defense. Obviously, the run game is one of the best in the NFL with Jonathan Taylor and a solid to above average of offensive line that could use, some help at the left tackle and the left guard. But it's a good move.
Fully expected a weird poop joke. Too used to watching Jason. I don't know what you're talking about. I said nothing about poop. I only mentioned the number 2. The number 2 in my life, Mike Manning. The number 2 in the NFL, Matt Ryan, replaces the former number 2 of the Colts, Carson Wentz. And no, that was not another joke. He literally wore the number 2. So there's now rumors that Julio Jones could be on the Colts' radar. If that happens, are you going to be back in on Julio for fantasy football purposes?
I'm going to temper my expectations, to say the least, when it comes to Julio. We should expect the Colts to add somebody. Their current depth chart has Michael Pittman, who did well last year. He was, he had a major target share, top 10 among wide receivers in the NFL. But the problem was they didn't pass the ball very often. So, there was like 4 or 5 games where Carson Wentz only had under 20 pass attempts. You can only do so much with that. So if this passing offense even stays similar to that with a veteran that's like Matt Ryan, it certainly could be, because it's going to be a run-focused offense. So if they add somebody like Julio, the volume's not going to be there.
No, it really won't be. It will be really condensed really into Michael Pittman, essentially. Mm-hmm. He is the alpha in that passing game. Julio Jones, where he's going right now in best ball tournaments, best ball drafts, he's a 15th round pick. Great. No problem there. That is beautiful value. Why not in the 15th round? But once Julio Jones' ADP starts creeping up, and all of a sudden he's going in the 7th round, in the 5th round, in the 6th round, I'm completely out. You can't do it at that ADP. You cannot draft Julio Jones in the single-digit rounds because you just can't trust him at this point. We saw the same thing happen with Andre Johnson, where he was great, and then all of a sudden he completely broke down. And like Andre Johnson, Julio Jones now could be following him to the Indianapolis Colts. But really, it's just Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman here in this offense. It's the Rivers Redux, as I like to call it.
Yeah, and that's not wrong. I mean, I believe that Julio is going to have his games this next coming season. He still showed the talent last season. I mean, I remember the one game, I think it was against someone in division, but I don't remember. I think it was maybe Houston or somebody. But Julio made one of his patented bobble it up and catch it on the sideline while doing the toe taps, everything. Like, he still has the talent. It's just, it is slower, and it's hard to believe that he's going to make it through the entire season.
it's not something that anyone should want to rely on in their fantasy football drafts. I know the drumbeat will grow louder once he signs, and then when we see the reunion stories at the athletic rights, and then when we see the training camp highlight videos of Matty Ice to Julio Jones, the reboot, we're going to start getting in our feels. We're going to get emotional, but we are here to tell you it's not 2016 anymore. It's not 2014 anymore. It's not any of that time ago where Julio Jones was a premier wide receiver in the NFL. So you can't rely on him. But Matt Ryan, fantasy football, probably can't rely on him either. What about these tight ends, though, for the Colts? We've got Kylan Granson and Mo Alley Cox, the Mac.
I mean, I would expect more from Mo Alley Cox than I will Kylan Granson.
Don't tell even Jordan McDonald that.
Even Mo Alley Cox last year, whenever Jack Doyle was on, a hampered leg to say the least on the way out, no tight end ran enough routes. I think it was over 50%. No tight end on the Colts ran 50% of the routes. So it's going to be tough to trust any of these guys because this is similar to the Cleveland Browns that have been doing, the Seattle Seahawks, where they like to use multiple tight ends. And that's great and all. And I'm sure that it helps out the run game. I'm sure that you like having your talent on the field, but that does not let you pick one of the tight ends very easily and use them very often. I'm sure we can have top 12 weeks from Mo Alley Cox, but then we're going to have plenty of outside of the top 24 for him as well. It's going to be extremely touchdown dependent like most tight ends are. And the big thing is Mo Alley Cox has the athleticism to break just about any of the receptions he has. He can break it for a big gain and possibly take it to the house. And he's a red zone threat, obviously being 6'8", I think, or something.
And so with all these ADPs, as we talk about quarterback, tight end, it really all depends in the end what the value is. And it's way too early for normal people to be drafting. So what about for the Falcons replacing Matt Ryan? Marcus Mariota is the new quarterback of Atlanta. Essentially signs a 1-year deal for $6.75 million with a $12 million option for 2023. So basically, it's a one and done for Marcus Mariota. Falcons are likely either going to draft his replacement this year, possibly Malik Willis, possibly Kenny Pickett, both of whom we'll get to later, but could also be a blow for Bryce Young situation where the Falcons are picking first overall. And in that case, why not pay Marcus Mariota $12 million to back up and be a mentor to Bryce Young? It's a win-win for the Falcons off the field, I would say, because they are a franchise in desperate need of rebuild. But on the field, Falcons football might be painful this year. Can we rely on Marcus Mariota passing to any of these players to result in fantasy value?
A lot of people are looking at Vegas Marcus Mariota, which is essentially he had one game where he came in where Derek Carr got hurt early in the game, and he had a good game. Mariota played well. He went deep often. He ran the ball when it was open to run. Got, I think it was around 26 fantasy points for the day. For a quarterback, great. And it shows what he can do. I wouldn't expect him to do things like that every single week, though, for you. Because if you look back to his Tennessee days, which is where Arthur Smith was with him, he had two different kind of careers there, basically. Early in his career in Tennessee, he would go deep often. He had deep average depth of target and was aggressive, especially with his legs as well. Later in the Tennessee Titans, time he was there, it seemed like he was skittish in the pocket. He reacted poorly to pressure, and his ADOT dropped dramatically. So are we getting, early Mariota, or are we getting late Mariota for the Tennessee Titans? Because the Vegas is too small of a sample size.
I think one of the biggest things to pay attention to with his time in Vegas is the amount of injuries that Marcus Mariota racked up during his time with the Tennessee Titans. So his first 2 years there, he was pretty healthy, and that's why he could take the time in the pocket to throw deep. I know he did get skittish, and that's why his average depth of target partially dropped, but he was skittish because he was dealing with nerve damage in his throwing hand. That's obviously going to affect the way you throw the football, how far you can throw it, and your performance on the field. And Mariota knew that he's a competitor, obviously, first and foremost, so he wants to be on the field. But he knew that if I take a seat, then I might lose my job to Ryan Tannehill. And eventually he was benched for Ryan Tannehill. But I'm excited after essentially 2 years to heal his body, to let the nerve damage undamage the nerves. I don't know how that works, but I'm excited to see what he can do. I really believe Marcus Mariota deserves another shot to be a starting quarterback, much like Mitch Trubisky deserves to be a starting quarterback again.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing I think we'll find out quickly is the offensive line didn't play well at the end of Tennessee's years. He was under pressure a lot and sacked a lot. This Atlanta Falcons offensive line is not exactly a group of maulers that's going to keep him, ups and ready to throw a clean pocket. So that'll be something that I think we'll find out quickly in the season, how well he will handle the entire Atlanta experience.
I think we'll see a lot of what, again, Arthur Smith did with Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee with those play action bootlegs, the run heavy approach, lots of read options, something that he couldn't run as much with Tannehill because Tannehill is sneaky athletic. He's got that label we like to give, but he's really not a read option quarterback. They really try to avoid that thanks to the history of lower body injuries, the ACL and such. He is a tactical scrambler and not a read option, whereas Marcus Mariota opens up a whole new dimension of the playbook, and that dimension adds fantasy points. So maybe it's not Mariota by day one. Maybe they do draft a rookie who ends up overtaking him, but I'm expecting to see a lot of run heavy team by the Falcons. So Cordero Patterson, that's a go. There's going to be a lot of play action to Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is, of course, a go. He's got no competition there, and it doesn't matter. Kyle Pitts is still going to perform. And Marcus Mariota is a sneaky value at this point because of the rushing upside. He is diet Konami code almost because he has that ability. We just haven't seen it in a long, long time. So Marcus Mariota, Mitchell Trubisky, or Matt Ryan, who are you taking in fantasy football this year?
I'd probably, it would depend because obviously this would be your QB2 if you're doing a year-long fantasy. It would depend on who I'm taking for my first quarterback because you want to, have a safe option, have an upside option. Mariota's that upside option. He's that guy that's going to give you a good floor, but you're going to get good weeks out of him, even if he doesn't have anybody to pass to. But I do expect Atlanta to address the wide receiver position at some point because they have to. Olamide Zaccheaus and Frank Darby are not going to be the starting wide receivers of an NFL team, I would hope, for an entire season.
Hey, the Wizard of Oz can absolutely start for an entire season as the third option. That's fine. But Frank Darby should not be an NFL starter. Neither should Christian Blake. And according to Steve, the only thing that matters here is Pitts. Franklin Delano Walker was good with Mariota. Waller was good with Mariota. Pitts will be good with Mariota. That's pretty good logic there with Mariota loving to target the tight end, especially when I don't like these correlation traps of X quarterback does or does not target X position often, because a lot of the time you have to look at the names at that position because, of course, Russell Wilson's going to target Jacob Hollister less than Jimmy Graham. But this is a correct one because Delaney Walker was a top tier tight end. Darren Waller is an elite tight end. Kyle Pitts is an allegedly elite tight end. So if they take a wide receiver with that 8th overall pick, I think that receiver is going to get overdrafted. And I think that's going to make maybe Kyle Pitts' stock tank a little bit. Oh, see, they know he's got there's too many mouths to feed. No. Kyle Pitts is the focal point of the Atlanta Falcons now and for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, agreed. That's a pretty easy. If people think that just because they draft a wide receiver, even at 8, and even if they do multiple receivers in the first couple rounds, and within the first 3 rounds, they could draft 2 wide receivers, and I still wouldn't be concerned about Kyle Pitts in any way.
Not even the slightest, because as Steve says, best receiver is a tight end. Best receiver for Jameis Winston, though. We don't know who it's going to be. There's still lots of questions about Michael Thomas, but that's because Jameis Winston is back with the New Orleans Saints on a 2-year deal. Rumors were the Carolina Panthers were sniffing around Jameis. They wanted to bring him in after missing out on Deshaun Watson, and so the Saints lock him up. 2-year deal. They're paying Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston about combined 50-something million, I believe. It's absurd, but Jameis Winston expects to be back for week 1. Is he anything for fantasy this year?
I think he's fine. He's not going to have the huge numbers that we saw in his final season at Tampa Bay. You know, he's not going to have 30 plus touchdowns, I don't think. I think we're going to expect around 20 something. He might pass 30, but he's not going to go for the, massive yardage, 5,000 yards or so. I don't think this Saints offense is going to look like that. They're not going to want to. This is going to be probably focusing on Cavanagh in the run game a lot, especially coming from a defensive coordinator becoming the head coach and Dennis Allen. I mean, I believe that he's going to want to rely on the run game, try and play it safe a lot. The big thing that he can do, though, is like for Thomas, especially being cast as the slant king or the short yardage guy. Well, he had success down the field. It's just his quarterbacks haven't exactly been players that target down the field very often. When's the last time that that Drew Brees had an average depth of target over like 7 yards? And Taysom Hill, we know that he doesn't look downfield. But the only times he threw downfield, the receiver had to stop, come back about 5 to 10 yards, and then try and catch it. So I think that can help Michael Thomas in that regard and opening up the playbook for him a bit. And I don't think we saw occasional Jameis ball last year. We just saw less of it than we did in Tampa Bay. Who knows if it was because of LASIK or not, but he didn't turn the ball over or put it in harm's way near as much.
They really protected him with a heavy dose of the run game, but he showed the flashes without the turnovers, as you just said. And that's all we really needed. And so I don't think this is going to be a pass-heavy enough offense because the defense is still pretty damn good for the Saints. So I don't know that it's going to be high octane enough where Jameis Winston is a weekly starter at quarterback, but he'll mix in depending on the matchup. And most importantly, he gets Michael Thomas QB1 production. Because I don't know if you saw, and people keep coming at me, no, we don't know if Michael Thomas is going to be back. He's always hurt. Is he? Because did you see his Instagram? QB1, Jameis Winston, and we control the narrative now. So that tells me that Michael Thomas is happy as hell that Jameis Winston is back, and he is happy as hell that Sean Payton is gone from New Orleans. So keep an eye out on the Saints to be a sneaky value in fantasy football. But Jameis Winston snubs the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers were in on Jameis after they missed out on Deshaun Watson, who signed a mega contract with the Cleveland Browns after he was traded. And we're not going to get too much into Deshaun Watson at this point in time. there is still plenty to unfold in his situation, whether it's a suspension from the NFL. We'll still have 22 civil lawsuits pending. So we're not going to get into the Cleveland Browns situation as much as a team. Instead, I want to talk about the ramifications of this trade for the rest of the NFL. Because as we talked about, most teams have their starting quarterback settled at this point. The Browns, in fact, even have their backup quarterback settled because they signed Jacoby Brissett to be the backup to Deshaun Watson. So Baker Mayfield is on the outside looking in. And by some reports, it may take a draft pick from Cleveland with Baker Mayfield to get rid of him. That's a massive fall from grace from the former number 1 overall pick. And I had this question asked just before the show started from my friend Troy. Is he a bottom 5 quarterback in the NFL right now, Baker Mayfield? Bottom 10? I mean, where do we rank Baker Mayfield?
Play-wise, it's tough to go off of just last year. You can't do that in a vacuum and be like, well, this is what we've seen from him most recently. This is probably how he's going to play next year. No, I mean, he was in pain. It was obvious. His ball did not have a zip on it, even with it being his non-throwing shoulder that was injured. Like he just...
Well, and it wasn't even just the shoulder, was it? It was the non-throwing shoulder, and then I think both knees and an ankle or something like that.
Yeah, so you got to take last year with a grain of salt. I know he didn't look good. There was definitely games where people were calling for Case Keenum to just come in just to stop the agony, basically. I don't think he's not a bottom 5 quarterback. He's not going to get you above the hump, likely. He's not going to take you over and turn your team into a stud because of his play. But I think that we've known that since he's been in Cleveland for most, other than his rookie year. His rookie year, he looked stellar. He looked like a stud. Whenever he took over for Tyrod Taylor, he set the rookie passing record for touchdowns, and he looked great doing it. But since then, they've relied more on the run game and kind of made Baker a game manager. His best season, I think, was 26 touchdowns. Since his rookie year, it's been like 26 touchdowns and like 7 interceptions or something along those lines. And that's what you can probably expect for a good season from Baker. His average depth of target isn't going to be massive because he doesn't have the strongest arm.
So that's where you're wrong. He has one of the strongest arms in the NFL. He just doesn't have the touch on the deep ball. I want
Odell learned.
It's a very distinct. It's a very important distinction because people will come at your throat if you say Baker doesn't have a strong arm. He's thrown it over 75 yards in the air. It was just through the back of the end zone because he can't control that hose.
Oh, against the Ravens.
But yeah, talking about if he's a bottom 5 quarterback, no, and I can prove it. Who would you rather have? Daniel Jones or Baker Mayfield?
I'd go with Baker.
Yeah, that's an easy one. Okay, I can't ask you this because you're biased, but I would take Baker Mayfield over Trubisky.
I mean, I liked what I saw. This is going to hurt. Yeah, it's going to be tough with me to not put any bias on this being a Steelers fan.
A Steelers fan who both wants Trubisky to be good and has been against Baker Mayfield for the last couple of years.
I mean, there is the reported rumors of the Steelers signing Baker if he was cut instead of traded, which I think is ridiculous because I don't think they would do that just for the simple fact of, I mean, I would be okay with it because get all the competition in the quarterback room you can. Perfectly fine with that. If you don't have your established guy, put a bunch in there, see who wins. And Baker has talent. We know that. Like he was number 1 overall pick for a reason. He put up numbers in college and like we've seen in the NFL at times. So I'd probably give Baker a tiny edge, and that's taking the Steelers' bias into account.
And that's 2 though. And as Steve points out, the problem with Baker is he's making $19 million, and the Browns can't eat any of that money. Yeah. And the rest of the league knows that. They know that the Browns have sewered themselves with this entire debacle. To round out the list of quarterbacks, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield.
Obviously Baker, yeah.
That one's a pretty easy one. I personally also take Baker over Carson Wentz and over Jared Goff in a 1-for-1
Goff
scenario.
I would. Wentz, I think I'd be pretty close on. Although Wentz makes way more unbelievable, like boneheaded type mistakes. It's just not they're not quite as frequent as some of Baker's seasons have been.
It's been the erosion of confidence over the past couple years, and the thing that stands out the most to me with Carson Wentz is we've got Jim Irsay, who's reportedly one of the best owners in the NFL. Really chill guy, really easy to get along with, allegedly. And he just hates Carson Wentz by all sounds of it. It's absolutely mind-blowing how much how loud the whispers are of the dislike for Jim Irsay the dislike of Carson Wentz by Jim Irsay. Because Carson Wentz tried to reach out and repair the relationship after the season, and Irsay ghosted him. Nope. You're a bad leader. You're not a quarterback. I don't want you. And for that reason, I think Baker is still a good enough leader. I think the locker room still seem to be behind him. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the reports of him being a bad leader come out years later like they are with Wentz. But Wentz, they're already out. Baker could easily start for Detroit, Washington, either New York team, Seattle, over Drew Lock for sure. That's another one I forgot. Houston or Carolina. Jason will yell at us for the Davis Mills slander, but I agree with you, Steve. But the question is, where does he go though? Because even the Panthers have said they're out on him now.
Yeah, like you said about the situation, they put themselves in a corner when they traded for Watson, but then also immediately signed Jacoby Brissett, where they could have portrayed it as they're okay with having Baker Mayfield as their backup quarterback. Wouldn't look great, but there's at least there's a sliver of a chance that that's believable. If you immediately signed another quarterback, well, obviously you're planning on that quarterback to be your backup quarterback, and you're obviously going to get rid of Baker Mayfield. So his giant contract is going to have to be like the Brock Osweiler trade years ago, which went to Cleveland, and they got a second-round pick, I believe, with Osweiler to just take on the contract. That's going to probably have to happen if they want to get him out of the quarterback room, because no other team is going to spend anything along a reasonable line to trade for him when they know, well, what are you going to do? Cut him? It's guaranteed money. The only places to go are Carolina and Seattle at this point, really.
What a mess for Cleveland, and that's without even getting into the fact that the quarterback who will be starting might be suspended for part of the season. Some team is going to get Baker Mayfield, and hopefully he surprises people. One of the teams it won't be, though, is the Miami Dolphins, because they've got Tua Tagovailoa, and they've gone all in around building around Tua. They signed the number one free agent in the minds of many in Teron Armstead, just gave him a mega contract to play left tackle for them. They also signed left guard Connor Williams. They signed Chase Edmonds to be their starting running back for $6 million a year. They signed Raheem Mostert to be their backup running back at $2 million a year. They signed a fullback, Alec Ingold. They've added 2 receivers. Trent Sherfield doesn't matter that much, but Cedric Wilson is expected to start, and then Mike Gesicki's back as well. So lots of moving parts here. In the end, it means Tua should have no excuse going forward not to succeed. But do you agree with my assessment that Chase Edmonds is the starter and Raheem Mostert is the 2?
Based on even the contracts at the very least, you have to assume that coming into it.
Thank you. Because people have told me the contracts don't matter.
I mean, I don't know how you
Right?
could think that contracts wouldn't matter. That's why starters get paid more money than the backups, is because they are the starters. They are better players normally. The only reason a starter wouldn't be paid as much is if he's a rookie or a rookie contract, and then that's when you take the value, then we're getting into stuff that we don't need to. But so that the Dolphins look like they're finally building around their rookie quarterback on a rookie contract, which is what you're supposed to do when they're on that contract. You surround him with talent. He either lifts that talent up and plays to his standards around him, or he doesn't lift up to it, and you realize you need to find another quarterback. So with 2 full seasons under his belt of play, well, not full, but 2 seasons of play, really, Tua's on his last chance here. He's got to make plays. He's got to look good and take this team to playoff contention at the very least. And this offensive line should be very improved. Edmonds and Mostert are serviceable backs at the very least. Edmonds is, one of the better pass catching backs in the NFL. He lines up at receiver more than almost anyone except, I think, Alvin Kamara. And Mostert is one of the highest yards per carry in NFL history. So these things are put in place, and it should be a good season. Will it?
It's the Dolphins, so you never know. Really, as it stands, the only I'm interested in Chase Edmonds. We'll have to see where the ADP lands, but Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki are the 2 names to know here. Cedric Wilson is probably going to be overdrafted at this point. He's getting a lot of hype that he doesn't deserve on Twitter, because Cedric Wilson, he has 900 yards, not last season, in his 4-year career. Cedric Wilson got a little bit overpaid and is being a little bit overrated, as is Kenny Pickett, because he had his pro day, and I don't want to be too harsh on the guy, but we're hearing rave reports about how he's got a cannon for an arm, which is just blatantly false for anyone who's watched Kenny Pickett. He's got a good arm. He's got a talented arm, but it's not a cannon by any means. And then everyone starts freaking out because Kenny Pickett, 8.5-inch hands. No, my friend. He is 8 and 5/8-inch hands. He added a whole extra 1/4 of an inch, or sorry, 1/8 of an inch to his hand size. So Kenny Pickett, is he back to QB1?
No. I mean, I went to the University of Pittsburgh so I am a Kenny Pickett fan in general, and I think he's a good quarterback. The hand thing is explained as he's double jointed in his thumbs. So if you put his hand like flat, then his thumb doesn't sit right. It doesn't sit normally. But if you wrap it around a football, he says that it actually goes closer towards a 9-inch hand. I don't know. That's maybe. That could be, could not be. Well, all I know is, I have bigger hands than Kenny Pickett. Like everybody else, everybody in Pittsburgh I know went to go measure their hands in radio and television. We're like, see if you had bigger hands than Kenny Pickett. But he didn't have a huge fumbling problem in college. I believe he had less fumbles than Desmond Ridder. I could be wrong. I think that was the name that came up when comparing. But he has a good arm. Like you said, it's not an elite arm, but it's a good arm. He's an above average is what you would probably explain it as.
It's not a cannon the way Malik Willis has a cannon, because he's the other guy that had a pro day this week.
Mm-hmm.
Could he go 2nd overall? Did you watch those throws that Malik Willis was making at his pro day? And I know there's no pads or anything, but my word, that man has some arm talent.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, the highlight one that they obviously make the last one intentionally to show it off as much as possible, leave a great lasting impression in everybody's mind. And he did. He, roll out to the right. A defender was there trying to block it or get to him. So he spins, goes to his left, and on the run, turns his shoulder opposite side and goes 65 yards in the air to the goal line for a touchdown. It was a beautiful pass. But and then we knew that he has a strong arm. We knew he can throw the deep ball great. That's not the questions involved in him. Like, we know his athleticism. That's why he didn't run the 40, because we know, why do we need to put a number on it? Lamar Jackson didn't run a 40, and everybody was perfectly fine knowing that he can run. And we know that he can break tackles. So that's, another plus for him. And we know he has a cannon of an arm. The questions were about his decision making and touch on more of the short intermediate, which is, there's plenty of quarterbacks that have to have that question coming into the NFL. There's a reason that he's expected to sit his first year. Most of these quarterbacks are expected to sit, other than maybe Kenny Pickett. But I don't think there's any question that he's bumped himself up to top 5 in the NFL draft, almost guaranteed.
But Lamar slipped to 25. That is incorrect. He slipped to 32.
Yeah.
25 was actually Hayden Hurst, because the Ravens drafted Hayden Hurst over Lamar Jackson. But I think the more important point to make there is Lamar Jackson was he was one of a kind at that point. We hadn't really seen many rushing quarterbacks that weren't built like Cam Newton, the freight train. So now we've seen Lamar Jackson. Now we've seen Jalen Hurts do it as well. And now Malik Willis could do it as well. So I don't think people are as worried in that sense. And the fact that it's a weak quarterback class means Malik Willis is probably locked into a top 10 pick at this point. Could go as early as 2 with a trade up. Lions could take him at 2. There's a lot of fun to be had with Malik Willis in this draft class, but there's a lot of fun to have at the running back position this year too, because I don't know if you saw, but Uncle Len is back in Florida. Leonard Fournette, 3-year, $21 million signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Does that kill all value for Keyshawn Vaughn?
Yeah. There wasn't really much value in the first place. It was I don't think many people expected the Buccaneers to go into the 2022 season with Keyshawn Vaughn as their number 1 running back on the depth chart. That wasn't going to happen, especially once Tom Brady came back. I'm sure maybe if they had Kyle Trask starting and Tom Brady had stayed retired, they might have been like, all right, Keyshawn, we'll give you a shot. But with Tom Brady returning, Gronk's going to return, Godwin come back, Leonard Fournette was almost a guarantee. I think the trip to New England was just to get more money or something.
Oh, for sure.
So that we knew that Fournette was wanting back. He wanted to come back. They wanted him back. It was a no-brainer. Number 6 in touches last year before he got hurt in week 15. Expect at least that this year, with Godwin probably not going to make the start of the season. And Rojo is pretty much guaranteed not to come back.
That's the biggest key there, is his ADP was so low last year, Leonard Fournette. It was lower than Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones was actually being drafted first. So he doesn't have that competition this year. I'm really interested to see where Leonard Fournette's ADP falls, because it was in the 6th round last I checked. And that's an absolute steal as it stands now. Have we talked about the Zadaria Smith signing with the Minnesota Vikings? No, we have not yet. So Zadaria Smith flips from the Baltimore Ravens. He doesn't sign, he agrees to a 4-year deal worth $50 million. Instead, the Vikings convince him, no, take our deal. We're going to pay you $47 million. So you're going to make $3 million less total, but it's an entire year less on the contract. 3 years, $47 million for the Zadaria Smith. The Vikings are going all in on the NFC this year, which I can't really say I blame them, because you look at this conference and it has dissolved drastically.
Yeah, if you looked at their moves prior to some of these things like Rodgers staying and then Russell Wilson and all these exodus of quarterbacks and talent coming from the NFC and going to the AFC, their moves beforehand were looking like they might think about a rebuild. There was chances of Kirk Cousins leaving. They thought maybe they'd trade Adam Thielen. They were There's still a possibility that they trade Danielle Hunter.
Nope, not anymore. As
Yeah.
of Monday, they paid him.
Yeah. So there was the tone has changed in Minnesota within the past week or two very much. And there's not, I mean, it's believable that they could make a run in this division or this conference because it's basically the Rams, the Buccaneers, the Packers. You can throw in Dallas, and then
It's a lot of question marks.
yeah, you
San
got
Francisco is going to have Trey Lance as a first-year starter.
Arizona is still having trouble with Murray.
And they extended Kingsbury for some reason.
Yeah, so there's a lot of question marks behind the top 4 to 5 teams. Minnesota, I could easily see being, if not a wild card team, even fighting Green Bay for the division title.
Cool, that is spicy. I don't know if I'm willing to go that far, but I do think they'll compete for the playoffs. In worst case, they don't, and they trade Kirk next year. It's a win-win for the Vikings, and it's a win-win for Rashad Penny because he goes back to Seattle knowing he is going to get absolutely fed the rock. 1 year, $5.75 million. Does this mean that Chris Carson is done for?
I think it's not. I mean, I think that it was guaranteed either way that Penny was going to be coming back to Seattle. After the way he finished the season, it just made too much sense to not sign him back. And you could see by their deal being a 1 year deal that gave him, instead of doing the 5th-year option, it was like $1.5 million pay bump for this signing they did instead. So they want to give him another shot because it is just a 1 year deal still. So go ahead, prove you can do what you did at the end of the season for more than that. And then this job will be yours. I think that they'll want to still do a committee of some sort, whether it be with Carson, because that neck injury just kept sounding worse and worse as the season went on. And we heard less about it, but anything that came out was bad. So who knows what's going to happen with Carson? He still has contract left. He's still on the team. I just don't know if he'll play. But Penny, he was, every time he's played pretty well. He's had a 5.6 yard per carry for his entire career. It was up to like 7.3 last year, but this guy had 130 plus yards in 4 of his final 5 games. And this offense is not going to look to throw the ball more with Drew Lock instead of Russell Wilson. The big thing will be, does he have as much touchdown opportunity with Drew Lock instead of Russell Wilson?
Drew Lock / Baker Mayfield ? Because Nick Chubb always did pretty good. Spicy take from Mike Manning. Vikings NFC North champs 2022.
They could be in the running. Let's not.
Back to Rashad Penny for a quick moment. He's top 5 all time in yards per carry. Do not sleep on him for 2022. I think he's going to be one of the more underrated running backs in the NFL for fantasy purposes. Mm-hmm. What about overrated though? Because Devin Singletary's been getting a little bit of a boost due to the fact that Zach Moss stinks and he's the only other back on the roster. Well, now the Bills have signed Duke Johnson, who a lot of people may write off as nothing, but in the lone opportunities we saw this year with the Dolphins, he went over 100 yards. He's still got it. He was always one of the best pass catching backs in the NFL. So is it over for Devin Singletary as a primary back?
I don't think that the Bills had any intention of Devin Singletary being RB1 workhorse type back coming into 2022. His end of the season was good. There wasn't really, like, his yards per carry wasn't anything crazy. His rushing yardage wasn't anything amazing, but he was getting a lot of touches in the red zone. He had 5 rushing touchdowns in 4 games to end the season. I think it was a little bit overblown, his usage. I think it was just the lack of Zach Moss and Matt Breida usage was the big thing, which they tried both of those running backs. They just didn't like what they saw. And Devin Singletary was a solid somebody you can be accounted for and know that they're going to go at least forward. He didn't go backward often. And he didn't get used in the receiving game. Duke Johnson, I don't think he really cuts too much into it either. He had 200-yard games, like you said, but he didn't get used at all in the receiving game, which was odd because that was his main role the rest of his career, was being a receiving back. I think that they're adding him because of the fact of Devin Singletary hasn't been used in that role very often. So they just wanted to have a third down type back that they could rely on. I still wouldn't be shocked if they use a pretty early pick on a running back if it falls to them.
That's the thing with mock drafts these days. Everyone year after year keeps sending Buffalo Bills a running back. Were they going to get Najee Harris? Were they going to get Travis Etienne? Nope. They're going to draft a defensive end instead.
They don't use their running backs often. They did at the end of the season, and that possibly could have been because they wanted to keep Josh Allen, a little bit more healthy for the playoffs. So that's just their MO. It very well might not change for ever.
All right, we're going to go rapid fire here for a couple players. Laviska Shenault, is it over? Because they signed Christian Kirk. They signed Zay Jones. They re-signed Laquan Treadwell. They already had Marvin Jones. They already had Jamal Agnew. They still have Dan Arnold. Well, that's 6 possible receivers ahead of Laviska Shenault. Is it over for Visca?
In Jacksonville, yes. At least it should be. There's no real reason to keep him on the roster because I don't see how you can convince yourself to play him over all of these other signings that you've made that are making more money than him, and you brought in yourself as the GM and coach. These were hand-picked guys by them. Laviska was from the previous regime. There's been trade rumors already. I've heard places like Pittsburgh are interested, which would be a solid place to go. They were interested in him before the draft, reportedly.
They could use a slot too.
They could use a slot wide receiver.
Ooh.
And they're not afraid to use jet sweeps and line wide receivers up in the backfield, things along those lines. So I think that'd be a solid place. But just in general, I think it's best for him to get out of Jacksonville.
I'll agree with that. I liked the nuance to that take of it's over in Jacksonville, but that doesn't mean we have to give up fully on Laviska Shenault. I just can't draft him right now in any sense.
No.
Zach Pascal signs with the Philadelphia Eagles. It's only a 1-year deal, but he reunites with his former offensive coordinator as the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. Does this mean it's over for Jalen Reagor?
He's going to play next year, but
is he?
Pretty sparingly at best, I would say. After his end of season, he had so many, not only drops, but big, important drops in big situations. I remember against the Giants, I believe he had dropped 2 passes that were either at the end zone or short from it that could have won the game. He had several fumbles as a punt returner in the playoffs alone. They were trying to find ways to get him on the field, get him touches, and he messed up almost every time. So I don't see how they're just trying to find suitable replacements to be able to put out on the field at the wide receiver position, I think.
Yeah, he's the wide receiver 4 currently behind. Obviously, we have the wide receiver 1, Devontae Smith. Now he's behind Zach Pascal at the the Z receiver. And he's also behind slot receiver Quez Watkins, who I am quite a big fan of, the speedster out of Southern Miss. Talking about some of these other slot receivers, Juju Smith-Schuster goes to Kansas City. He's going to be a target hog, especially because they've lost Byron Pringle to the Chicago Bears. And now they've lost DeMarcus Robinson to the Las Vegas Raiders. So my question is, if Bryan Edwards loses out to DeMarcus Robinson, is it over for Bryan Edwards?
Oh, yeah. Done. DeMarcus Robinson is a depth piece. Yeah, it has been his entire career. He's been mostly a deep threat for the Kansas City offense that wanted to, use Tyreek Hill to, take some coverage another way and then just have DeMarcus be wide open down the field the other side. And he had his big games because he, is an athletic player, can jump up against the ball fine, speedster as well. But if he never made it past Pringle, he never made it past Sammy Watkins. He had trouble. He didn't get past Hardman really. And we all know how people feel about Hardman's talent. So it's just, if he jumps Brian Edwards, who had his chance last year, even Zay Jones came out of nowhere and jumped Brian Edwards. So it just seems to be like a rinse repeat process for Brian Edwards where somebody else steps in on the roster and just takes in front of him.
I think this is, if it happens again, which I don't expect it to. I am not currently listing Brian Edwards behind DeMarcus Robinson on my current lineup updates on Twitter, which you can find everywhere at Cavanagh87. But if he loses out to DeMarcus Robinson, it's over. I can't defend him at that point. Couple more notes to wrap up on here. Marquez Callaway, he's still recovering from thumb surgery in January. Expected to be back for training camp, but could miss off-season workouts. And as we like to say, you don't look for injured players. You don't go out seeking injuries. And so Marquez Callaway, we're going to be fading until we hear he's a little bit healthier. Maybe that happens in July when we start drafting more frequently. But until then, we just got to keep that feather in the back of our cap that Marquez Callaway still struggling coming off the thumb injury. And got to touch on the fact that Bill Belichick has said the Patriots will no longer be using a fullback in their offense. Jakob Johnson signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. He was told by Bill himself that they won't be using one next year. So Jonnu Smith only played 46% of the snaps last year. Jakob Johnson played 27. Could we be seeing a boost in snaps for Jonnu Smith and therefore a boost in fantasy production?
It's hard to not boost it very much. I mean, it was a very a confusing signing by the end of the season, looking at his role in the offense, because you had both him and Hunter Henry signed for, I think it was 14 plus per year. They both became top 5 paid at the position, and they both had their own roles. It's just Jonnu was not used as much of a pass catcher. He was used more, I mean, in the backfield,
he was an H-back.
In line, yeah. And Hunter Henry was set out at the wide receivers slots, is out wide and in the slot, and that's why he had good fantasy production with touchdowns. He was very touchdown reliant, so it's kind of watch next season if they add any wide receiver help, because maybe he comes from Hunter Henry. But Jonnu was highly targeted when he ran a route. I think he was number 1 in the NFL in targets per route run. Problem was, he only ran about 160 something routes. So not much to be able to do whenever you don't have that opportunity. It'll be interesting to see if they start to look at that. Maybe they don't add a wide receiver at all really in free agency because they spent all their money last year. They might, they're not known to draft very well at the position. So maybe by default, Jonnu Smith has to have an increase in the passing production.
Well, Bill Belichick is rumored to be the one calling plays for the Patriots this coming season. But all of those questions are things we simply don't have the answer to at this point. But it's just fun to come out here and speculate on what is to come. So at _Mike_Manning, thank you so much for joining me here tonight. Any final thoughts before we head out?
Let's just keep an eye out because the offseason never ends. We're still on we got draft coverage coming up as the pro days continue, and free agency isn't done. It's just slowing down. Signings are going to happen. Trades might still happen. Offseason's never slow, never truly done.
The offseason is never truly done, and the information and important nonsense is never truly done as well. So check us out over at importantnonsense.com. Follow me everywhere at Cavanagh87. But until then, I will see you next time.